Hi, this is Willow at Tuto Farm, where I share the realities of urban homesteading. Planting out the garden can be a real challenge, so here I break it down to plant what you need, how much you need, and how to avoid being so overwhelmed. You'll also get a glimpse at what it looks like when you've been gardening for 20 years and have been saving seeds. Okay, so here I am going through my seeds. I'm going to start and go through in the order that I actually plant things. I'm starting with my leeks, and onions will actually be in that group too. I didn't buy any seeds this year except for onions and beets, and I think that'll be pretty obvious why. After my onions, I'm going to plant these perennial flowers. I chose a lot of native varieties because we just moved here and it's time for me to fill up the front yard. You can probably see that the theme is purple. The first thing that you want to do when you are planning out your garden is to figure out first how much space you have. I know I have 8 raised beds. 4 of them are 8 by 4 and the other 4 are 16 by 4. I have some room in the perennial beds for things that can survive the ducks and the dogs, but that's really limited to maybe some winter squash. Here I am going through my tomatoes, and you can see I have a real problem. It's not just me though. My husband collects a lot of seeds. Tomatoes are tricky because there's so many cool varieties, but there's like 30 seeds in each pack and you really only need 5 or 6. So after knowing how much space you have to work with, next you want to prioritize the list of plants that you absolutely want and the list of plants that is your wish list. These are plants that you will grow if you have extra room. So if you're not sure where to start, go through a seed catalog and make sure you don't miss anything. And don't forget herbs. Try to limit new things to either varieties of what you already grow or just like 2 to 4 new types of plants. This is where you want to make sure that you're growing what you'll actually use. Next, you want to go through your list and determine how much of each plant that you're going to need. And this can be really tricky if you're not used to gardening. I've been gardening since I was 6 and I still get it wrong. I once planted 12 plants of chard, and I do love chard, but 12 took up an entire bed and really wasted space I could have used for things I was going to eat more of. So now here I am going through some peppers. This is also an area where we have way too many seeds, and I'm hoping to kind of thin these out over this planting period. You can see we often have multiples of certain things. Sometimes they're not labeled accurately, and it can get overwhelming pretty quickly. Here you can see that I have an entire other bag of saved pepper seeds. Other things to consider when you are planning out what you're going to plant. You want to make sure it's going to be easy to store and process. Things like tomatoes are great, but they do take a lot of work to can them unless you're just going to freeze them. Here I'm going through some of the herbs that I'm going to plant pretty early. That's celeriac and celery, as well as probably some parsley. Another thing to consider is, can I succession plant that, which means plant it multiple times throughout the season, or at least stagger it. That works great for things like radishes, salad greens, and beets. These seeds were kind of a mess. I think it was a variety of different herbs, including thyme and oregano. There's some cumin. Later, I actually went through a lot of these and relabeled and reorganized. Succession planting also means that you can plant in the same spot with multiple things or multiple times, which saves you a lot of space. You also want to be mindful of how tall and how big these plants are going to get. Are they going to block out the light of the other plants? And some things are honestly just better if you buy them in the store, such as maybe frozen peas. Corn is another one. Dry beans. If you don't have a lot of space, that's going to eat up your space pretty quickly. Here I'm going through more culinary herbs, including basil. That's another thing I realized I didn't need 8 plants of. I really just need 2 to 4. Another thing that's usually not considered too much is, does this plant give you joy? Is that its value? Is it beautiful? And it's probably a great pollinator as well. If you find your garden beautiful, you're way more likely to spend time in it and take care of it. I'm also going to plant some summer savory and sweet marjoram. And although I don't really use the sweet marjoram for much, I love the smell of it. And it also provides food for pollinators. This is another big group of plants for me, the brassicas. So my cabbage, broccoli, kohlrabi, and kale. I make a lot of fermented food, and so this is a big group of plants that I plant a lot of. Kohlrabi is often one of the underrated plants too because it's small, it takes up not a whole lot of space, and it is delicious. So you should definitely give it a try. So up until now, I've gone through seeds I'm going to start indoors. Now let's take a look at some of the stuff I'm going to direct. So included is radishes and beets in this category. This year I went way overboard with the daikon, and I'm not allowed to plant it again. Also in the direct sow category is carrots and rutabaga and parsnips. So I always do plenty of carrots because they're pretty easy to wash and store, and they last pretty long time. So I try to do a variety of those. Rutabaga is another staple for me. I just love the taste. Parsnips, I kind of ebb and flow with. I do love them, and obviously my dog's named after them, so I must like them. And then this last year I did try salsify, and it didn't do well in the fall, but I'm going to try it again in the spring. I have the seeds, why not? Peas are another thing I'm going to plant pretty early. They can withstand up until like the high 20s. I love the sugar snap and the ones you can eat the whole pod. I find that the other ones are too tedious and you don't really get much out of them. Beans are another staple for me, and I love the yellow wax beans, but honestly I'll plant whatever seeds I have at this point. I also do edamame every year, and that's kind of the exception to the dry bean rule because you do get quite a bit and you can use them for many different things. They also make a great protein-rich snack. Here I've found some more collared kale and arugula seeds. Those are seeds I've saved over the years, and you can see that you get a lot from a single or a couple plants, so be mindful of that. I'm trying to use them for sprouting this year. Mustard greens are another great one for anybody who's starting out. I love bok choy, and it goes pretty easy, and I've also heard of people using it as a companion or a trap plant for pests. I also have a French variety of cabbage here that kind of acts like Napa cabbage, and it's slow to bolt, which is why I planted it here in St. Louis. Here are some regular salad greens, and honestly I can't even trust what's in the package because I mix them all the time, and I also save a lot of my own seeds. One of the things I remember about my grandma's garden is her lettuce because she always grew the same type that she had saved seeds from years and years and years, and honestly the variety wasn't really that great anymore because it didn't have very much variety. As I've been gardening and saving my own seeds, I did honestly notice something similar where my lettuce got a little bit boring, so I make sure to mix in other varieties every year. Spinach is another plant that does really well in the early months of really cold weather. Because it gets so hot here in St. Louis, it doesn't actually have a very long season. So I actually planted a New Zealand variety that did really well here, and I'm definitely going to plant it again. I was picking from it all year long. And of course I will plant some chard this year, just not too much. There is this variety of chard that it's kind of like a cross spinach that tastes pretty close to spinach and does pretty well in this heat that I will try again as well. Collards are one of those plants that I really love planting, but I don't eat a whole lot of. I think I planted 8 plants, and I think I'll drop it down to 2 to 4 this year. I did find some old asparagus beans that I'm not sure if I'm going to plant again. They do take a long time to produce and take up a lot of space. I absolutely love summer squash and plant at least 4 to 6 plants every year, although I may up the game a little bit because the squash bugs are relentless. They are so hard to manage. The only real way to manage them is to hand pick the bugs and their eggs off the bottom of the leaves every day. This can be pretty unrealistic, especially if you go vacation on the weekend and come back and your plants are all dead. I will continue to plant summer squash, and interestingly, I actually never have a surplus of summer squash. I seem to go through it pretty quickly, and my plants kind of ebb and flow. So winter squash is another one of those situations where I just have way too many seeds at this point. I've been saving too long, and I need to go through them seriously. Especially with the squash bug battle, I want to really focus my energy on things that are going to come through. One interesting thing though is that if you really love using pumpkin, you might want to consider just growing some winter squash, because sometimes you get more out of the plant and it is just as tasty as pumpkin. Here you can see that I have some additional seeds from years past that I've been saving. Cucumber is another one of those situations where everywhere I move there's a new bug, and this year it is the cucumber beetle. I tried covering, spraying organic stuff, and nothing seemed to really work. I did get a few to eat, but I got to figure that one out for this year. So there you have it. This is my seed collection that I've accumulated over the past probably 10 years. None of them are older than that. Stay tuned for some videos on seed starting in the next couple of weeks. And to see more about ducks, urban gardening, and frugal living, please hit subscribe and feel free to comment with video ideas or questions.